All right, let's get started. Good morning. Good morning also, Sue. We're very happy to have you in this coffee conversation. We'll be discussing trends, developments in the credit management order to cash area the coming next 30 minutes. So, but to start with, could you please introduce yourself?
Well, good morning, Flora, and thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. So I'm Sue Chapple. I'm the Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Credit Management. I am a dyed-in-the-wool credit manager by trade. I've worked across many industries, utilities, public sector, finance, banking, but always with credit management and credit teams. So that's me.
Okay. Well, and as a leading figure in credit management industry, what has stuck out to you the most in the last 7 months in regards to the industry we know or we knew?
Yeah. I think the thing that stuck out the most is just how adaptable and resilient we are as an industry. Right from the very beginning in early March, our sector got going, really collaborating, supporting each other. Credit teams switched so quickly to home working, barely missed a beat in doing it, and it had never really been a thing amongst credit teams before because it's very much a team environment. So yeah, I think that how adaptable we are as an industry, and that hadn't really been tested in that way before.
Yeah, I think that's that goes for a lot of industries and companies that had to adapt really quick to pretty big changes, right? And I can imagine that the current situation brings a lot of uncertainty in the market in regards to the future of the organization, but also job security. How do you feel people and companies prepare for something like this, something they weren't able to foresee?
Yeah, that's the $64,000 question, isn't it? And as I've already said, I think, we now know, if we didn't know before, we now know what an adaptable and resilient community we are. I think from a people perspective, being positive, staying positive is the #1 requirement. Things will get better. I think stay on top of your professional knowledge, look for opportunities in a period of change. Change always brings opportunity, even though we don't always see it, and sometimes we feel it's all negative. It isn't. It can be daunting. Uncertainty is daunting. I think organisationally, businesses will adapt and evolve, and market demand will drive the way that evolves. And that's always been the case since time immemorial. But the overriding need for businesses, and therefore for credit teams, is to stay on top of the cash flow, maximise the cash, minimise the expenditure. That's always going to be the mantra.
Yeah. So. But how exactly? I mean, because these are, there's also a social side to it. So I can imagine that's quite a delicate balance between social responsibility you have as a country, as a business, and on the other hand, yeah, you have to keep your business running, so you need the cash. So how do you?
Yeah. It's an interesting thing, and it's the age-old back to basics of being a credit manager. Paying is always good for everybody. Not paying is never good for anybody. So, whether you're the recipient or the payer, paying on time is always good because it keeps balance sheets accurate and it keeps businesses going. And the reality is, if you've got a customer in the long term that's not paying, they're not a customer. They're a debt on your ledger. So, we talked at the beginning about how well credit teams are collaborating, and part of that collaboration is getting much closer to customers. And we've seen a lot of that straight away. People have got on the phone to their customers. And one of the benefits in the early days of lockdown was because everyone was at home, there was very little challenge of getting hold of your customers because everyone knew where everyone was because everyone was at home, right? There was people were accessible. So I think some good relationships have been built between customers and businesses. I think conversations have been much more than they were before, and automation has really helped that, because automation has had to come right to the fore and help organizations to identify who it is they need to speak to and when. So people are managing their ledgers in a different way to make sure that customers have what they need in order to pay, making sure that you understand the customer's market as well as your market, because understanding the ripples that go out from your customer is one of the things that's going to impact your cash flow. So those conversations are really important. And then what we're seeing is organizations putting in place the required measures to manage that. So clearly, if it's a short, medium, long-term difficulty that the client's got, then the organization can make decisions based around that. Understanding and knowing is the first step.
Yeah, that kind of is in line with, we conducted a research in the UK amongst the finance professionals and credit professionals, and we found that 66% of the respondents said that they work more efficiently since the pandemic in March this year started. So that's something you must recognize based on your answers.
Yeah, well, I recognise the research that's being bandied about quite openly by the media, and I hear organisations saying these words, but I'm a little bit sceptical of some of this, because equally we're hearing organisations say, under the circumstances, getting everyone out of the office and working from home to an unknown location, because people do, you know, organisations don't know where their staff are. They might have the address written, but they don't know what those facilities are. Yeah. It worked better. Getting people into that environment worked better than I think most of us anticipated it would, because we'd never done it before, and you've got, you know, all sorts of situations. But there's been nothing to compare it with. So saying it's more efficient than it was before, I think is slightly spurious, because we didn't do this before. I think one of the things that hasn't yet been measured, and I think without doubt will be a challenge moving forward, is all the softer stuff. So you can do the factual stuff very easily from home. People can get Zoom or Teams or whatever it is on their laptops, and you can talk to people, and you can do the kind of technical stuff. What you can't do is the slightly more soft people stuff. So as a manager and a leader, when you're in an office with people, you can see if they're okay. You can see who your top performers are. You can see what the interaction and the mood of the organization is. You can't do any of that online. So I'm a bit skeptical about this kind of, it's been more efficient, but we'll see.
Yeah, I can imagine that in the beginning, people felt it really was. I mean, there's less distraction. They can do their work. And I think there were also researchers stating that you could do your normal 8-hour work in 6 hours while working from home. But the 2 hours of social engagement and just talking to somebody at the coffee machine or whatever, and just gaining information, talking to people outside of your own department, that's the whole part we're missing out on, right? And I do agree with you that might have a long-term effect, that it's not as good or positive for businesses.
And very difficult for managers and leaders to manage those sort of teams. It's a different skill set that we've not had to have before. So that's still out on that for me.
Before you mentioned that these kind of changing circumstances always bring some opportunities. What are the opportunities that you can see now already starting to take place?
So I think that there's a few. I think there's you will see very quickly who steps up to the plate, and that will be amongst your client base, amongst your suppliers, and amongst the team. So that's a real opportunity to see, you know, which suppliers do you want to continue to work with, which of your customers are more challenging. So there's that. There's the whole technical piece that for a lot of organizations, you're hearing things like, 2, 3, 5-year plans executed in 2 months, 6 months, 3 months, decisions got through boards to do stuff that hadn't been done before. And I think organizations properly using the technology that they already had in a way that they probably hadn't had to before. So I think, automation in the credit management process has been around for a long time. And there's been a lot of capability in the software that organizations haven't really used because they haven't really needed to. So I think that's a real benefit as well. And I think one of the other positives is around people. People are taking a good hard look at what it is they do, how they do it, how they want to do it, and where and which organizations they want to do it for. So people working for organizations are looking at their employer and thinking, how have they dealt with this? And it's not just about the working from home thing. I think that's all become a bit of a catch-all because people talk about the work-life balance when in a lot of cases what they actually mean is life-work balance. Yes, please, I'd very much like you to pay me for a full-time week whilst I spend 50% of the week doing my own things. Thanks very much. Not quite the same thing. But I think it's, has the employer stepped up? Are organizations making decisions when they need to make decisions and not standing on the fence? Are organizations letting people go back to the office if that's what's important for the staff and keeping them safe and all of those things? Are they providing the right equipment? Are they all of those things? And of course, there's attrition in the market. So there's people moving around jobs. So there are job opportunities. And funnily enough, the employment market is quite buoyant because people are on the move. And I think that's a split. Obviously some sectors are really struggling. Hospitality sector, obviously, some parts of retail, obviously, but the areas that are working well, recruitment is out there and going on. So I think there's lots to be positive about.
I think that's in the Netherlands as well. That obviously a couple of sectors having hard times, but others are really doing well, or at least there are a lot of job openings. So in terms, you briefly touched upon automation, digital transformation, AI, machine learning. They have all been kind of buzzwords in the industry for quite a while. Actually, we did another research on the adoption of technology where surprisingly, most or only 30% of the professionals said they already use a kind of systems or software to support their processes, and they were looking into starting using it within 1, 2, but 40% stated over 3 years. And I thought that was, I was pretty surprised by that, since the techniques are available already, and it's not so why would it take this long to adopt these kind of tooling to help you make your processes more efficient? And what's your take on this, and how do you think Corona has impacted that?
Well, I think one of the challenges with technology in the credit management industry is that the credit teams are parts of organization that are doing something else. So the main business of the company is something else, making something, selling something, creating something. And that tends to be where the investment in tech is in the core business. And I think organizations are slower to the party when credit teams are doing a good job, as credit teams will. And, we're in the credit industry, we are the past masters of the Excel spreadsheet. I mean, you will find the most well-loved, beautifully sorted, long-lived Excel spreadsheets in the credit industry that you'll find anywhere. And we do a good job of demonstrating that they're efficient. So you've got the two sides of the argument. You've got a company that's main thing is something else, being convinced to spend some money on something that they see is efficient because we demonstrate efficiency. Of course, where it falls apart is if you lose anything in that spreadsheet, or if you get new people in, it's not consistent, things aren't joined up. So I think that's always a challenge in our industry. I think the other challenge is that there's a perception that the cost and the compatibility are risks for organizations, because one of the things that you'll also find, particularly in the UK, but I doubt whether it's limited to the UK, is organizations have lots of different systems, and the credit teams run across all of. You need to get information from AR, from AP, from finance, from sales, from all of that, and that can be a challenge. And I think sometimes a lack of understanding and a perceived view that this is all going to be really expensive and take too long and spoil what we've already got. So I think there's a lot about education, demonstrating education. Yeah, it's an age,
because that's what we see as well, and especially at the integration of the different systems where the data is shared in terms of maybe if a customer is non-paying for a long time, then you might want the orders to stop, or you want to at least make sure that your CRM system also has that information for the account manager to be aware of it at least. So that, I think, maybe brings me to my next question. It's accounts payable, procurement are usually all seen as strategic issues within companies. And especially given this uncertain times, accounts receivable should be higher on the agenda, I think. So what's your take on that? And how would you suggest order to cash managers or to accomplish this?
Well, it's an interesting one, and I've always been of the view that credit management is the whole process. So credit management is from the time a contract is signed, well, in fact pre-contract, managing the risk, right the way through until a customer is fully paid up and no longer a customer. That's the whole process. So I see AR and AP as two ends of the same thing. So I absolutely agree. I think procurement is slightly different. Over the last 5-10 years, procurement has become a strategic cost-saving part of most businesses, and most procurement teams' priority KPI will be about a percentage cost reduction each year. So that's a slightly different thing than the ARAP. I think communication within the organisation is the biggest thing to getting you up the agenda in boardrooms. I think don't be shy with stakeholders, share the benefit, talk about managing the biggest asset that the organisation has, which is their cash. It is the key thing. And, just get out there and talk to the other stakeholders, get that communication. And I think that has changed significantly over the last 5 years. It's not many organisations now that still view the credit management teams as the backroom boys. They're pivotal in sales, in collecting payments, in billing, in all of those things. So I think it is changing. It's a journey, as we like to say, but it's I think it has started. Yeah. In terms of a journey, something we recognize and hear from our customers and people in the industry is that at the customer journey and customer experience is becoming more and more important as well. And we all know it's cheaper to keep an existing customer than to get a new one in. So, and where maybe the credit or collections department used to be, well, not that much involved in the customer journey, they are a very important part of the journey where they can make a very bad or a very good impression in maintaining a customer. How do you see this impacting the way we approach collections? Yeah, I think that's a fascinating one, because for many organizations, the only touch points they will have is at the point of the contract and at the point of non-payment. Because if they do everything as they should, there would be no reason to ever be in contact with anyone. So, the collections teams, the credit management teams have that real opportunity to turn what we used to call in the olden days terrorists into activists. It's how you sort stuff out is what pegs you out as a good company, not how stuff just gets done, because we're indifferent to that. As a customer, we're indifferent. If everything goes as it should, it's fine. It's when there's a touch point. So I think what's happened over the last 6 or 7 months in what I'm lovingly calling the nonsense period has been that there's been more conversation and dialogue, because there's had to be, because we've had nothing else to do. That's the only thing that people can do is talk to each other. So much more conversation between customers and organizations, much more conversation between teams. Most organizations set up very regular team conversations to try and compensate for that. Oh, Bob, have you done this? You know, that you used to do at the coffee machine that you can't do now. So I think that has been the biggest benefit, is the talking to customers, understanding customers. And of course, customers have had an incentive from the beginning, because they want to make sure they still get what they need, and they want to get the support as we go through this process in the same way. So it's worked. It's just to be hoped, as things start to settle down a bit, and normality is gradually juddering back into the world.
Yeah.
Stop, start, but it sort of is, and people are more distracted now. So, you know, people are starting to go back to meetings. Some people are in the office, so everybody isn't just sat in front of their computer all day now. That starts to be challenging. So we have to find ways to maintain that increased conversation that we had before.
Yeah. Yeah, how do we hold on to that? So how do we take the good things out of this period and make sure that they don't move to the background again once we move into the new normal?
Yeah.
And so what's your tip there?
So I think it's definitely about, you know, I keep saying this phrase over and over again. It's about knowing your customer. And we've needed to know our customers through this phase in a way that we've never needed to know them before. And so we know that now. We know which of those customers. And as things get busier, because we've had this, it's been such a funny old hiatus of a time. In some ways we've had more time, and in some ways we've had less time. It's been a really strange contradiction. But now, as things sort of pick back up, generally people have got less time again, because life is kicking back up. So it's not just about being sat in the house and not doing anything else. So I think it's, who are the customers that you need to speak to, and how do you identify which ones you need to speak to? How did you do it in the nonsense? How are you going to sustain that? And it's, automation is going to be one of the ways that is done. How do you set your systems up to tell you who you need to speak to and when you need to speak to them? Which ones are going to benefit from being spoken to earlier, and how do you identify that? The automation won't do the conversation, it won't tell you what to say, but it will flag with a set of rules who is it you need to speak to. And I think that's the way we've got to go. Yeah.
Okay, is that because this is on the short term, when hopefully on a on a short notice we'll be back in the new normal, but in the long run, if you what do you think would be the biggest challenge for finance professionals in the coming years?
So I think the cash flow and the ability to flex in times of difficulty will always be the challenges. They always have been. Staying close to customers, being aware of changing circumstances and being able to react quickly to them. Anticipate where you can, but react quickly, and you know, put the customer at the heart of everything you do. It's not new. It's not, this isn't rocket science. It never is rocket science. No. Good credit managers do the right thing for the right customer at the right time. And that is always the case. It's how you identify who's the right customer, what's the right thing, and what's the right time. There the magic lies.
Yeah. Well, which obviously, and now that there's much more data available about your customer, there are many more ways to figure that out and determine who should be in which bucket, and who should be approached in a certain ways. I think, and there's so many gold we're sitting on in terms of the data, if only systems are connected in the right way, and we use that data that is stuck somewhere in all these kind of different kind of silos that are not connected most of the times, because they're old or they are, well.
And I think in some cases, you know, there's a little bit of fear of all the data. there's too much data, and how do you use it? And I think, you know, going back to your point about the customer journey, where that works well is in organizations where the customer journey is mapped out with all the touch points of the organization, all the various teams. That's when you realize how much data you've got and how you can piece it all together. So I think that's definitely something for organizations to look at, is mapping that customer journey right the way from pre-sale to lost customer, all the way through all of the steps. That's a job worth doing. Yeah,
and it's sometimes also just starting somewhere, right? Start small and build from there, instead of trying to do it all at once, because it is a lot of data and it is a lot of different angles and but just the trial and error method might have you a good start. Just start somewhere. All right. Given the time, it's I have one more question for you, and that's the question I always ask all of the guests in this coffee conversation, and that's, what's your golden tip for those listening?
Stay positive. We'll get better.
Awesome, great. Sue, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been lovely to see you, and I look forward to doing it in person again when we properly can.
And me too, as well. If we are able to travel again anywhere soon. Thank you so much. And for those joining, if you would like to learn more about Sue and what she's doing at the CICM, we will be sending you an email afterwards and can bring you into contact with Sue. And if you would like to know more about our coffee conversations, because there are a lot more coming up over the coming couple of weeks, check out our website, onguard.com/events. Thanks for joining, and hope to see you next time. Thanks, Sue.
Bye.